All right, here I am. Sorry I'm late. I fell down a rabbit hole and I was trying to get some caching statistics to display out, and I got surprised by some of the results I saw, and blah, 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 blah. So I've been trying to figure out what's happening, and I got a feeling that it's just not running enough times to really see what is happening. Or what I think I'm getting out of my static cache stuff is not what I thought I'd get. So let's take a look at what I've done. And then we're going to get into actually dog fooding this stuff. Because in the olden days, back in the Roman Empire and so on, when an engineer would build a bridge, the Roman government would make that engineer stand underneath the bridge that they had built while a legion marched across it. And if the engineer screwed up, well, he would pay the ultimate price for his mistakes. Similarly, in early days of aerospace, when somebody built an airplane, the engineers would be the first ones to have to fly on it. In software, we call this dog fooding. And I like to say it's eating my own stuff before I serve it to somebody else. So we've got all this stuff: name cache hits, name cache misses, method cache hits, method cache misses. We can see in the console writes I'm doing out in the, oh, come on, here we go. Out in the main program. The first time we run the app, we're getting nothing but cache misses. And then the second time we run it, we've accumulated one cache miss, one cache hit, and we get an entity name cache misses 2 both times, but no cache hits. So I want to make sure, just because I'm curious, anytime I deal with the name cache, I know that's happening in the version of guard types or equivalent 4 when we pass in types instead of thingamjiggers instead of instances. So let's go to the definition of get entity name. So if entity name is not null, we increment name cache hits. And let's go in here. The entity name, if attempt count is 0, found, while found is false and attempt count is less than 3. Okay. And then we return the entity name. All right. I actually want to step through this stuff, because if I'm not asking for the same idiomatic types entity name more than once, it might not make sense to be caching this stuff. But we'll find out. Yeah. So let's run it. And it's building. And here's our first miss. The type that we're looking for is user ID resource. So our idiom entity cache has nothing in it. it's going to try a couple of times. So I'll just do this. That's a better spot for the breakpoint anyway. So there we go. Our entity name is null. Let's step out. If entity name is not null, we can increment the cache hits and return the name. Name cache misses plus plus. Jump in here. Idiom is the type. It's user ID resource. Idiom entity cache does not contain it. So we try to add it. And we can return. Let's go again. This time we're looking for probably the external ID. Yep. So that's a miss. That's legit. It's going to store the external ID in the entity cache. We now have, come on. Can I not see it? It's not null there. Why don't I see any of my variables? That's very peculiar. Oh, because we've exited the code. Duh. Nothing more to do, blah, blah, blah. So this is odd. We ran over it twice here. We ran over it twice here. And I think what I need to do idiom.get custom attribute, return entity name. Okay. All right. So let's instead drop a breakpoint here and here. Yeah. Let's try running it again. Because we should hit this each time we go through the method. And if we run all the way out to our test console, we see that we're calling the loader create customer profile for probably the first test case. Yeah, for my user ID. And then we're going to call it again with my GeekDad user ID. So let's carry on. Custom attribute, domain entity attribute, blah, blah, blah. Where the name cache misses, it's 1. This is that. We're about to increment because we're looking for a different idiomatic type. So I'm going to come out to program and drop another breakpoint on this second invocation of the use case. So here we go. We're down to loader create customer profile. Here's our hits. Here's our misses. And let's just run. And it didn't hit any of those things. Very peculiar. I may have goofed something up with declaring those statistics. Private static int, name. Okay, so those are right. Method cache hits and misses. And for some goofy reason, the second time around, it did not. Oh, and here's why. Because it didn't even have to call that the second time, because I'm only calling for those entity names when I'm building the dynamically typed map method for a complex object. So that works. So that's global. That's forever. That's for the lifetime of the object and the application. So that's cool. That's actually super duper handy. And yeah, that works. I like it. Okay. So what I'm going to do just to save on console space is I'm going to get rid of those report cache stats. I'll leave the bottom one just so that I can continue to observe science happening. And I can get rid of that breakpoint, and let's get rid of these breakpoints. What I want to do this afternoon is actually dog food this, or continue dog fooding this stuff that I've built. So let's save the change over here. Just logging the domain mappers, private cache stats here. No need to do it every time, but it's handy to have around. Just leaving a little note for myself. So the domain object mapper, I don't think we need that right now. So our customer builder, we're going to be missing an awful lot of stuff in here right now because we haven't, well, we still need to say profile under construction dot apply account from account resource, because we haven't yet mapped, or we haven't yet decorated several other things that are coming in from that account resource over to our user profile. So let's go to the definition here. Excuse me. These external IDs, we're totally mapping those. We're good there. So for now, I'm just going to comment those guys out. External IDs are being mapped automatically now. Frickin' sweet. Let's take a look at the subscription. So we're going to load up the customer profile. Go to definition. And let's focus in on this subscription guy. We don't have an entity attribute for the subscription yet. I don't think. Let's take a look. So we've got our customer profile, the mapping extensions. I'm just going to pull that over to my other screen for a while. I want to leave it open because we're going to be adjusting it again later. Customer builder, same thing. I'm just going to stuff that over on the other screen. But what we do care about right now is our application user. So we'll bring up that definition, and we do not yet have an attribute for subscription. Nor do we have, if we look in our domain constants, a definition for that application subscription object yet. So I guess the first thing that we got to do is add a new class for this. A new file, it's going to be a class, and we're going to call it SaaS domain application subscription. This guy, we're going to zap that, make this a partial class. Nifty. I want to pop one of these open just to make sure I've got all the namespaces I need. And I do. Because I'm not even using system namespace here. So we could probably zap that. And we can probably zap it here too. Yep. We're just using constants for now. We might run into some scenarios where we're going to have to import things from system, like when we introduce a date time property. So there's app user, we'll leave that open. External user IDs, we don't need it. And the format for defining a domain entity is public static class application subscription. Public const string entity name application subscription. Public static class attributes and in here is where we define the property names or the attribute names for application subscription entity, just like we did over here. So I'm going to close this for the time being. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead. Public const string subscription equals, and let's just call it subscription. Close. Now, I want to look at both the manager version of that, and that is called a customer subscription over here. All right. And we'll just double click the header on that because we're going to need it back. We're going to go back to customer profile in a minute. We are also going to need, from the resource access, let's come down to user account abstractions, get the account subscription resource, and we're going to need to update the user account resource in a moment too. Because right now we don't have subscription decorated over here. Probably take a look at the customer profile and make sure subscription is nullable here as well. Okay, it is. This might get us into some trouble in a minute. We're going to find out. But if it does, we know how to handle it. We could just create another strategy for mapping over in our domain object mapper. So let's take a look at application subscription and customer subscription. I'm just going to pull this off to another screen so that I can refer to the property types over here. All right, we have public const string user ID, user ID, we've got a SKU, which stands for stock keeping unit, aka the subscription ID. Public const string start date UTC, public const string end date UTC, and these are not great names. Rename. Current period start. UTC. Rename. Current period end. UTC. All right, I can leave those string values as is. These are much more descriptive and semantic. Excuse me. We are going to have also some public const string will renew. Current status. We're going to have an object for quotas, which are those limited resources that we grant to our users courtesy of their subscriptions. And we're going to have an attribute named history, but I want to change this to subscription history. And this represents a collection of activities that have happened that modify the subscription. So here's our entity definition. Let's apply this to a account subscription resource, user account resource. Let's first apply this to the customer profile. Now, the mapping ain't going to happen magically yet because we haven't got those attributes decorated onto our local idiomatic types. But we can assign them now. Entity attribute, entities, dot application subscription, dot entity name. Oh, wait, wrong. Attributes dot subscription. Application user dot subscription. And this guy is a special case because he is entity attribute name is that. Comma. It is of type application subscription. Is collection is false. I'm going to grab this entity attribute. All right. And come over to account subscription resource. Nope, wait, wrong. User account resource. Drop this on a subscription. Now, if you're watching this live and you're watching me do this, this feels a little bit onerous and a little bit confusing. But I anticipate that when I start adding new data contracts and realizing that I need new domain types and stuff like that, that I haven't created. I'm playing catch up right now and I'm retrofitting this domain entity concept into my existing code. Excuse me. This part is going to feel a little sticky, a little gooey, so on and so forth. This is, hey, Argon, or Foregone. This is a new thing that I'm trying that I introduced earlier this week. Um, Rather than using, say, a whole collection of C# extension methods to map between different types of the same conceptual thing, I realized that I can declare these conceptual things as like just string constants to define what the entity names and those entity attributes would be for these conceptual things, and then apply these via attribute to the actual idiomatic types for those conceptual things. And then I've got a utility class in the system framework that I'm developing that shuttles the values between an instance of this idiomatic type and that idiomatic type, without me having to explicitly write a ton of mapping code. So let's start. So I've decorated the complex type attributes on the owning classes. So we can close customer profile for now. I think all of these guys have attributes now. Sort of. Sort of. The entities don't exist formally. If I had like an actual class that represented, say, an application user with like properties with getters and setters and all that stuff, it would be enormous because each vertical slice of my system has a different view of what an application user should look like. The administrative system cares about things like what their ID at the payment processor looks like and how long they've been a subscriber and so on and so forth. But when we're using an application user object from the point of view of the actual product, it cares more about profile information like user ID, their display name, their quotas, etc. So I've got each of those things are idiomatic types that live within those subsections of the overall domain, right? And of course, I've got a different view in my manager layer, the sort of workflow coordinator. It sees a application user as one type of view versus the resource, which sees an application user with a different view versus the way it's stored on the back end. Those data models that actually get written out to databases or Azure tables or whatever look completely different. But they're all just different representations of the same overall concept. So my entities, using the word that you use, well, they're semantically coupled no matter what we do. This model is a form of this entity. This other model is a form of the same entity. And all this does is it sort of links them within that semantic space. And once they're actually formally linked within the semantic space, we can do some really fun things like automatically map them. Yes, I have a mapper to decouple them. And the mapper just looks at these attribute values and then uses some .NET reflection. So the mapper, it doesn't need to know really anything about any of this stuff. This is just how I associate one version of a model to another. And that's it. There's no real value with these constants other than making sure I don't have to update things. Oh, sure they can. I just can't automate the mapping. I'll show you where I'm going with this. This is 100% optional. Like, I could, and I already have, written a whole pile of C# extension methods. This is the customer builder. So let's take a look at this subscription to manager model. I've got all this manual type mapping already. I want to make it so that I don't have to write this crap anymore. Because what I can do is, instead of calling that extension method, once I'm done, okay, yeah. I've seen things like mapstruct. In the .NET world, we've got something called automapper and so on. And all those attributes are doing that I'm decorating my data contracts with are just creating that sort of semantic link between the concrete type and the abstract domain concept. These entities exist only as concepts. There's no real implementation of that application subscription. You're unlikely to ever find a class called application subscription anywhere in my code. If I do create one in one of these components, it's a coincidence. Because all this does is describe the conceptual view of this domain entity. That's it. And identifies the attributes that may be present on an actual idiomatic form of that domain entity. And these constants, I don't have to use them, but it's a good idea so that I don't have to, when I decide I need to rename an entity's attribute label, I don't have to find start date UTC in 6 million places in the rest of my code base. It just abstracts those magic strings away. Let's take a look at account subscription resource. And I also have where are you? I think I closed it like a bonehead. In the manager, I have a customer subscription resource. Or not a customer subscription resource, just a customer subscription. And let's glue that in up here. Grab the tab, drop it in. So we need to decorate these. First off, I inherit from Idiomatic Type. In the Java world, I believe the magic word is extend. Yep, yeah, there's a lot of them. Mapperly, Mapster, Automapper, TinyMapper, etc., etc. I've used Automapper in the past, and I really disliked how much extra effort it created for me as a developer when I had to go and change stuff. And in a lot of cases, leveraging Automapper was more work, even while I was implementing things, than just doing things manually with .NET extension methods would be. This class decoration through attributes, in my opinion, is actually pretty trivial. So I need domain utilities attributes. I also need service model taxonomy and entities. So let's get rid of this magic string. And I'm also going to get rid of this superfluous attribute closing stuff. Customer subscription, yes, we are in the manager archetype, and we just plumb out entities dot application subscription entity name. Cool. This guy gets entity attribute, user ID, easy peasy, entity attribute SKU, Entity attributes, current period start. Yep. There we go. We'll renew. Current status. These guys are weird ducks. We're going to fix the, we're going to extend, or we're going to increase the amount of information that's expressed in these entity attributes right now. Entity attribute name. Come out to the end. Is collection, is false. Value entity name, entities dot. I'm just going to put a null there for now because I need to define that. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to comment that out. We're not going to map that yet. Entity attribute name is collection is true. We don't have a subscription activity yet because I haven't set up that domain entity definition. So we'll comment that out, and we're not going to map it automatically yet. So let's pop open the account subscription resource and do a very similar exercise. So our account subscription resource turns into an idiomatic type. Boop. And all this domain entity and idiomatic type stuff, Argon, it's metadata. It exists solely as metadata. Attribute. And I need two entities dot, oh, stop it. That's right. If I'm going to use an alias namespace, I have to bring that namespace in manually. So there's that. Using entities equals Copilot remembers entities dot. Yep, this is an application subscription. We're good. And then, of course, Copilot is super big brain. App sub user ID. SKU. Current period start. Current period end. Will renew. Current status. And we'll just go through all of that stuff and comment this bad boy out. None of these attributes that I am adding right now have any effect on the code in the components. And they have no effect on the behavior of these value types if you want to use domain-driven language. I don't like using the word value type because that means something very specific in .NET. But DTOs, data transfer objects, data contracts, POCOs, plain old CLR objects, or plain old whatever, require them as import using. The only reason I'm doing these usings is to get access to the code that lives in these namespaces. Oh, I could rip these entities out. I could delete them all, and it'll compile just fine. Even though these using statements are up here, all this means in .NET is that using that developer.ifx.domain utilities, the code in this file uses some code from this namespace. Now, if I remove the project reference to the .NET project that contains this code, it won't compile. But if I reference a namespace and I don't use anything from it, it doesn't halt my compilation. It just takes a little longer while the compiler says, "Oh yeah, I don't actually need to load the types from this assembly into this assembly's memory space." So when the compiler renders all of my C# code down to IL, intermediate language, it's the same thing as JavaScript or Java bytecode, basically. I can tell it to strip out unused references at that time and all of that magic. And a lot of people don't want to use .NET because they think it requires Windows. I'm on a Mac. And when I deploy this to Azure, I'm running it in a Linux container. I haven't mucked around with Mono a whole lot. This is .NET Core. It just turned 10. And .NET Core was designed from the outset to be fully cross-platform. So that it'll run on Windows, damn near every flavor of Linux that exists, and Mac OS. It's pretty sweet. So we've got my basic types. No, I can still make UIs with it. I use Blazor for that when I need to. And there's .NET MAUI that I can use for if I want to do a native application. And of course, .NET is smart enough to reach into Xcode and pull out the Mac OS or iOS modules when it's doing native compilation to access the necessary Mac OS or iOS, or I don't think Watch OS, but definitely iPad OS. Like, it can get the necessary modules to run those graphics routines for me. Oh, Linux graphics, forget it. OpenGL. I looked at OpenGL once, and I still have nightmares. But yeah, I mean, I can build a visual UI, no problem. I can do like an ASP.NET MVC for web. I haven't mucked around with doing like a native application UI. Not with .NET. I did some tire kicking on Swift and Xcode years ago, just for fun to see if I could. But yeah, .NET MAUI would let me build custom UIs for all of that stuff if I needed to. So I've got my attributes decorated on the resource component, and the resource version of the class is what my resource access component acts on. And this is really just the public contract for my storage components. I've got a storage component written to write all of this stuff out to an Azure Table Storage account and then retrieve it. But the rest of my code doesn't know about table storage or Azure or SQL or anything like that. It only knows that it wants an account subscription resource. And then I've got an interface over here that describes the verbs that we can use, or that we can use these types with. And those, the behavior contracts or service contracts, they're completely unaware of any of these attributes. So I've got those mapped. I've got this mapped. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the profile mapping extensions. Let's bring that into my main workspace. And instead of doing all of this stuff manually, what I'm going to do is take a very, very short pause, like a be right back. And then I'm going to comment all of that stuff out and move this quota assignment out to just use the standard extension method. So I'll be back in like, you know what, let's take an intermission. I'll say 5 or 10 minutes or less, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to get rid of this extension method style mapping and replace it with something more automatic. So here's intermission. I'm going to mute my microphone. All right, I'm back. Sorry about the break, folks. I've been going for about an hour now, and I want to finish up this aspect of it before I break for the day. So just to demonstrate how it works right now, pretending those attributes don't exist. I have a feeling that it's going to automatically map most of this stuff for me. Just a sneaking suspicion, because I've put those attributes in place. Where is my customer profile? There's that. Here's the customer builder. Let's bring this window back. So over here, I'm calling the map entities. And I'm just going to drop a breakpoint right here. Here we are. I know what I'll do. On this subscription entity, or this subscription property, I am going to comment that out. Pretend I didn't do all of that setup that I just did. So come out to the customer builder, and we're going to step into the object mapper, but just into the first invocation, because it does get recursive due to entities existing as properties of entities and collections and so on and so forth. But we're going to step over mapping, auto mapping the subscription, and show what happens inside this apply account from, which is the old way. So I'm just going to run, and it's doing things. It's spinning up my application, or it's compiling, and now it's building out the services. And let's step in. So here's the only place where these attributes actually matter, is inside my domain mapper. So we guard that the types are equivalent, and we check source instance is a user account resource. It's associated with the application user. The destination instance is a customer profile. It also is associated with application user. Nifty. So we get just a dictionary of all of the properties on the source instance and the destination instance that are mapped to some entity attribute. And on the source map, I've got 5 of them. And this is on the resource. And on the destination map, we should only have 4, because I commented out that subscription decoration. We figure out which properties are common between the 2 types. And that's just a little guard clause. Like, if the 2 types don't have any properties in common, we're going to bail. I should probably turn that into warning and return that immediately, but I don't have that pattern in place here. So I'm just going to throw. Eventually I might log. So for each key and common keys, all we do is we just loop over the properties that these 2 things have in common, and we map them. We convert the attribute from the source to the destination, and assign it to the destination instance inside that convert attribute. So we're just going to step over a few times, and I'm going to drop a breakpoint here and say run to next breakpoint. And that's just some science I did over the type caching so that I can cut down on the total amount of reflection I do. And here's my destination instance. It has an awful lot of stuff on it, but it does not yet have my, okay, that's an external user ID. We're into that recursion stuff. And here's our customer profile. We do not have a subscription. It's null. So let's step out and we're back to the customer builder. And here's our profile under construction. In the old way, we step into apply account. We do our mapping, do all of that assignment manually. We set some stuff, and we're back and we have our fully constructed profile. At least for the parts of that profile that we know about today. And we can continue. And just I'm calling it a second time on a different user just for testing, and we're good. All of this call timing that you see here is automated. I don't have any code in any of these classes that writes how long a call into them took. And that 8 seconds is just because of the breakpoints. So let's compare this experience. First thing I'm going to do, because I haven't set up the domain entity for quotas or subscription activities, is I'm going to say model.quotas equals resource.quotas.toManagerModel. Save. This, comment it out. We're not going to do that anymore. If model is null, we'll just create a new one. It's not going to be null. Save that. Excuse me. Now let's come back to customer profile and re-enable this entity attribute. Whoops. I'll just do it the old-fashioned way. There we go. Excuse me. And we'll make sure my customer builder still has the breakpoints. Now, when we ran this before, when we came out of this domain object mapper, that subscription on the profile under construction was null. Let's see what happens this time. Our destination instance, this is a customer profile. Our subscription is still null. Peculiar. Step. Go. I feel like we ran into some errors. Maybe. Oh, we might have gotten ourselves into an infinite loop. Or not. Cache misses, cache hits. We do all the things. Okay, so something didn't quite work the way I expected it to. So let's get rid of all these breakpoints. What's this customer profile thing? Get rid of that. We'll leave this stuff in place. Okay. Does quotas really need the user ID? Because by the time we're dealing with it out here, I don't know that we necessarily need it. Yeah. Okay. So let's come back to the builder. And this is why we dog food things. Drop into the domain object mapper, go to map entities. And just run down here. And hit F5. Okay, so for each string, source key, and common keys, let's see here on the source map. Okay, that's that. We have ID, display name, subscription status, correlation IDs, and subscription. And then on the destination map, user ID, display name, subscription, subscription status, and correlation IDs. Cool. So I want to see what goes on when source key equals subscription. Go. All right, source key is subscription now. Source property is account subscription. Okay. Property name is subscription. And it is the account subscription resource type. Destination property is the customer subscription type. The name of the property is subscription. Good. And now we get the value. There's all the stuff. And let's convert the attribute. The source value is an account subscription resource. Good. Destination instance is a customer profile, so we need to create the destination value. We're there. Destination assigned is false. We are not directly mappable. It is not a collection, but it is an entity value. So we need to convert the entity value. The map method is totally null because we haven't calculated what it is yet. Get entity name, application subscription, application subscription. Here's our method. Now we need to invoke it. Subscription resource is the source. destination resource or our destination instance is null, but now it is a customer subscription. Good. We should have a number of common keys. First thing we got to map is source key. Our destination instance now has the user ID and what? Is SKU. Oh yeah, of course. Source value is that. There's that. This is probably will renew. Yep. Destination value, we cache the method, return it. Assign it. Our customer profile now has a subscription on it. Good. Step out. Profile under construction. Subscription is not null. Beautiful. So that worked. That worked nicely. There's Geek Dad. Here's Rob. And for some reason, we've got 4 misses on that entity name cache. But that's okay. And inside apply account from. Come on. Here we go. Here's the to manager model. To resource. Where's apply account from? Here we are. Inside the manager model, or the to manager model method rather. We're no longer manually copying those property values. And that's pretty frickin' handy. So we can just flat out delete those. And now we can apply the mapping for quotas, history, etc. The only thing that we don't have automatically mappable here is quotas.userid from model.userid. And I'm questioning whether or not I need it here. At least coming from the resource. I'm definitely going to need it in the other direction. I'm going to have to assign it before I try and store it. But we're getting there. Save this. And I'm just going to keep adding this mapping, defining these conceptual domain entities over in my application constants down in here, and applying them to the types that need them, and getting rid of this manual mapping code, getting rid of these extension methods. And eventually I'm going to get to a place where I can come up into my resource access classes where I've got some table to resource mappers. Excuse me. And be able to do the same darn thing up here. Because I'll be able to pop into my user entity, inherit from idiomatic type, probably turn this into an internal. Excuse me. Oh no, I'll need to leave it public, but whatever, it's fine. And just decorate these guys, some of them, with the with those entity things. Now, because I'm instead of storing the hydrated sub entities, I'm serializing to JSON and storing the JSON in the Azure table. We're going to have a little bit of impedance in here, but it's okay because that stuff is hidden from the external resources. So we are going to still have a little bit of manual mapping in here where I have to call some JSON extensions, like to rehydrate to a specific type of my instances, but I'm not going to cry over that because I've got a lot of that distilled down to extension methods that I can apply to whatever. So yeah. All right. I have eaten my dog food. I have stood under my bridge. And now I'm just going to keep standing under that bridge offline because there's no sense in streaming while I just keep doing the same rote tasks for a couple more hours. But once this stuff's done and I've got the conceptual to concrete mapping done, or conceptual to concrete decoration happening, I can delete a whole bunch of extension method code, and then I'm going to port the collection utilities and domain utilities and a class from inside service model taxonomy. And it's an enum over to the repository that holds just the developer.ifx and do a big fat pull request over there. I'm pretty happy with how this stuff's shaping up. I'm very happy with it. And yeah, I hope it helps somebody else out too. I'm going to have to write a boatload of documentation and whys and hows when I port it into the main framework stuff. But yeah. All right. It's the weekend. And I've got a bunch more work to do here on my side. And Mrs. is away, so I'm probably going to work on stuff late. I might play with other code tonight. Just some silly things that I'm jamming on. But she's not home to nag me to stop working. So I'm going to be able to play with code into the evening. And that's probably what I'm going to do tonight, because there's some ideas I want to chase and some concepts I want to prove to myself for other things. But until next week, have a safe, fun, relaxing weekend. Relax in whatever way you find most suitable for yourself. And happy coding. Take care, friends.